Hey everyone, welcome back to JLXP, the 10 Thoughts series with Kien Lam. Just a quick note, as this is getting released Thursday at 6 a.m., we recorded this just before the Pole Belter to COG news broke. We're going to try and rush out a quick reaction podcast for that, so hopefully you've already listened to that one. It will have gone out Wednesday. But just so you know, for this conversation with Kien, we were recording it before Pole Belter to COG broke, so hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to JLXP, the Josh Leesman Experience. I am Joshua Jat Leesman. This episode, I am again joined by Kien Lam. It is Wednesday at about 10:30 a.m. We are previewing Week 5 and going over Week 4. Kien, the writer of the 10 Thoughts article, usually the jumping off point for our conversations today. How you feeling?
Feeling great, Jet. I was actually thinking, I want to start with a question. I'm just going to throw one at you.
This is good.
Every week when I send you these articles, so I have to share it on email before it goes live, obviously.
Yeah.
Every time I go and type in your name, I type Jat before I type Josh, and it made me wonder last night, does anybody call you Josh still? I'm sure personal friends from long ago do, but I'm curious, in the scene specifically, does anybody call you Josh?
So I'd say in terms of pro players, no one. In terms of coworkers, it's like a 50-50.
50-50, that's pretty good, actually.
And it's basically at a point where, I don't care. I just respond to both names. I'm not one of those people no, it's Josh, please, just Josh.
Yeah.
I don't do any of that. It's just, I will respond to both names. That's kind of one of the reasons that this is the Josh Leesman Experience is I don't hate my name. Yeah. So I'm okay with more people knowing that my name is Josh as well as Jat as I transition into more things in life. So it's honestly a 50-50. I could kind of care less which one it is.
Do you feel let's say 20 years down the line, whether you're in esports or not, do you feel like Jat is the thing you even want to hold on to, or do you eventually want that to retire and go away?
I honestly don't know, because I don't want it to be one of those things where we've seen more and more esports personalities pick up their name as their avatar. But I also think it's one of those cool things about esports where everyone has to pick a screen name, so you become known by that name. And I had the name Jat back in Guild Wars in 2006.
Yeah,
so it is a big part of my my identity. So I don't kind of want it to ever completely go away. But yeah, it's undecided.
So if you're getting married, do you want the pastor to be do you, Joshua Jat Leesman?
That one, I'm going to say no. But I guess I'd be open to the idea.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right, so Jat potentially will remain.
Yeah, and I mean, you've always been Kien Lam. You don't want people mean Mr. Kien. Do you take? Because that's just a play on your Twitter name.
Yeah, that helps people know how to pronounce it as well. Some people still get it wrong. I'm mean Mr. Kien.
I see.
It kind of helps people pronounce it.
Because otherwise people be Kien or something.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I keep it. But certainly I don't think, because my name is in it, I don't think people will ever go the full way. Sometimes people call me, Mr. Kien or whatever. But that's about the extent of that.
All right. Well, heading into Week 5. We have your 10 Thoughts article, which is still 10 thoughts. You've done consistently 10. You told
10?
me at the start of the year, sometimes you have 6 thoughts or 7 thoughts.
When we hit playoffs, quarterfinals.
That's when it's 6 thoughts.
Well, this year, what is it, 8? No, is it still 6?
It's for the spring split, it's 6. For the summer split, it's 8.
It's 8 in summer, yeah. So it's usually it's 6. It's always looking forward, and sometimes I will do a quick eulogy for teams who are knocked out. So going to semis, usually sometimes I'll keep the 2 teams. Especially if it's somebody like TSM, CLG, I'll keep those teams around. But a lot of times I start trimming and just focus on the teams going forward.
Cool. You had some nice synergy with your first thought where you have Cloud9, 8-0, the 10 towers, because they've only lost 10 towers so far this split.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It is. There's some more crazy stats. Did you see someone on Reddit made an infographic of stats, and this is obviously a representation that might not be the best for analyzing things later in the year, but it was a great display of how dominant C9 has been in comparison to other teams. So what he did is they had a kills and deaths plus minus, and C9 was plus 102. Oof. The next closest was plus 16. So Cloud9 has 102 more kills than deaths. So in 8 games. And they are 104,000 gold positive this year.
Wow.
Across 8 games. The next closest was EG at 3,000.
EG was number 2. I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, I know, because everyone is either a little bit in the negative or even because Cloud9 is just taking everyone's gold. Like even if they're positive, they were so negative when they played C9 that they're just in the dumpster. And that's kind of what LCS is after 4 weeks. It is Cloud9. The Dive called it the soup, but it's really just this massive chunk of teams between 2nd and 9th, and then COG. But let's get some more of your thoughts on just how ridiculously dominant C9 has been.
I mean, it just made me think about, like, historically, I think both of us are people who are, like, study the game, think about it, like, in context a lot, and it's just, and we've talked about the 2016 Immortals, 2016 TSM, go back to Cloud9 2013. It's just very rare for us to see an A team in particular come out and just crush people like this, and I think it's a good sign, honestly, for the league as a whole. I think slowly everybody else starts to catch up to Cloud9. It's not that they're going to necessarily fall off. It's that everybody else has to elevate or they become, like, relevant. And I think that's really good for the league as we start to get closer and closer to MSI, start getting some international play, and you start looking around the world at other teams. Like in Korea, there isn't any team that looks this dominant. Like you've seen all the top teams start falling. Like even DRX lost last night. China obviously isn't playing. And then in EU, you saw G2 falter last week and dropped O2. So Cloud9 is the one team in the world right now, at least in the major regions, that is just crushing everybody still. And I think that bodes well for us. Is like, if you can't like just shit on NA when you're playing, then what chance do you have when you start going against all the, like, that's the thing that always bothered me about like Liquid last year was they were struggling against teams like they won 4 splits in a row, but they weren't always clean splits. There was a lot of close playoff series. There was a lot of close regular season games. They never just completely obliterated the league in the way that Cloud9 is doing right now. And of course, there's still 10 games left in the split. But I think
we're not even
half
half done.
Like you have to be able to crush NA if you want to have a chance internationally, where the international teams have historically crushed NA.
This is definitely too early to have this conversation because I hear what you're saying, and I've been thinking about this myself. I mean, I thought about this all the way back in like 2013, where the original like Jat Dilemma meme came from, because back then, original Cloud9, 2013 summer Cloud9 was so incredibly dominant in the region, and then we had the number 1 seed from the EU LCS at the time, and it was that really close finals between Lemon Dogs and Fnatic. Like the EU LCS had a bunch of tumultuous games and a really close competitive scene, and I was like, well, what is better heading into an international competition? Is it total dominance of your region, or is it peers that push you to a higher level? And I still don't know which one can be better, because what I've seen play out in the past is like what could end up being something that I would be scared of is, let's say C9 actually goes 18-0, and then, like no other team has done before, actually then sweeps the playoffs. Because even when Fnatic went 18-0 back in 2015 of summer, they had a 5-game series against Origin in the finals. So it's like they'd tasted defeat. I don't want the first time C9 tastes defeat to be during a short group stage.
Yeah, that would be
right. And how do they adjust to that? So what'll look bad is like, no one could even think of touching this team in NA, and then they still lose internationally. That just like puts the whole league on a lower level.
Oh yeah, we're doomed if that happens.
Yeah, which is just, it's doomed. It's good for the excitement of, hey, this team is going to be really strong, but it sets you up for more failure. So what I really hope happens is that someone emerges to push C9 to a higher level and allows them to taste a bit of defeat if they are going to be our MSI representative. So that's where I'm looking at Liquid. I'm looking at TSM, maybe a FlyQuest that can pull something together, but I don't feel like they have the top to bottom talent to push C9. That's just like, I'm already at this level of anxiety with C9 where it's like, they're so good. Are like, they need practice losing. What are your thoughts on 18-0 stuff? Because last week I had Tyler on, and we were already like, what's the percentage chance that they go undefeated? And I said 25%, and kind of immediately thought after I said it that felt high. Luckily, they did win 2 more games, so now it's a higher likelihood because there's only 10 games left. But Eika, one of the European or LEC stats guys, tweeted at me because he did a bit of an analysis on it, and I actually set up an Excel sheet. So here's some interesting stuff. 10 games left. If we say C9 has an 85% chance of beating everyone, and a 60% chance of beating peak TL in Game 18 of the split, they'd only have a 14% chance of going undefeated.
Ooh, that's really low.
Right? Even with an 85% chance. But let's just say, like, if they average an 85% chance to beat any team, then it would be a 19.5% chance to go undefeated.
You take those stats, you send them back to Eika and tell him he can have his numbers. I'm going with my heart here. I'm going to say a 50% chance Cloud9 goes undefeated this split.
What would be... hold on. I need to... I kind of want to do this now.
And just at him. Be like, you keep your stats, bro.
Well, it's like they would need such a high chance of winning every game to be a 50% overall chance.
See, the way I look at it is... without the numbers, I'm like, okay, Cloud9 is better than this team. They're better than that team. So I'm going to go down the line and be like, who's going to win this game? I'm picking Cloud9 every time. 50% chance.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's basically just quick maths here on my laptop. I believe, they need about a 93.5% chance per opponent to win to get a 50% chance of going undefeated.
Okay, I would give them a 99% chance against every opponent right now.
99?
Yeah, I think they're that much better.
Okay, then it's going to be higher than 50%, Kien. There's...
whatever that number comes out to be, that's what I think.
No way it's 99%. You can't play FlyQuest 100 times. You'd be like, yeah, we'll beat you 99 of those.
Yeah,
like,
I'm
best
gonna,
of 100s.
I'm giving time. I've watched enough games to split where I'm like, okay, 8 games, that's a huge sample size. That's all we need is... And just Cloud9, they've just felt so good to me going into the split. And it's like I think I was reading a Reddit comment where one of the people is like, is Cloud9 actually good, or are they just better than the rest of the league, which is like just like a fiesta or whatever?
Both.
Yeah, and then for me it was like, when I look at season, they're playing a lot of things correctly. Like this is exactly what you want a good team to look like. I think we've had dominant, like I'm gonna like TSM in particular is a team I think of that has dominated NA in the past, but has never looked in a way, like they never played the game in a way that I was really like super confident in.
I will agree with you with one caveat.
Okay.
I think the 2016 summer TSM was playing similar to the way this Cloud9 plays.
It was a lot more aggressive.
They had, I remember going into World, C9 or TSM had like some of the most dominant early game stats of all teams globally.
Yeah.
Going into that. So like that was the one split where TSM actually was aggressive. And then, a lot of the other times TSM won, it was kind of like the TL style where they just beat you 25 minutes, even though the game looks a little bit shaky up until then.
It's just a lot of times it's like they have better laners. There's like they're just so much better at laning. It doesn't actually matter what they do, and I like, and that's somewhat true for Cloud9 as well. But I think the bigger thing is it's not necessarily that their individual players are so much better than their counterparts in their particular roles. It's that they're so good at translating early game advantages into the mid game. Just the way they move around the map, they're willing to make plays. Like you'll see Niski play a game, and he'll have like 3 deaths or something, 4 deaths, like going into any, and it's fine because everybody else follows up on that. And I think that's something that's really valuable to me as a team that's super good. I think we've seen Chinese teams dominate the last couple of years doing similar types of styles. Like they're just very aggressive, very fast paced. And I think that's something that's gonna I think that's what makes me confident about this Cloud9 team as opposed to like the slower paced teams that are like, they'll win the game like with 6 kills. They're very methodical to do the Baron. They'll slowly choke out the other. Like I've never liked watching that style because it never works against international opponents.
It's going to be really interesting. The conversation that I keep having with like any of the analysts I talked to this kind of past week is this question between early game aggression and scaling. Like historically, every time we reach international events in the last few years, it's been the more early game team is dominant. Yep. But you don't have to look that much further back to see that scaling has also won its fair share of world championships. Yeah. Just look at SKT winning. Their 2013 one was like way too far in the past, but that was actually like early game stuff. But their 2015 and 2016 titles were a lot of like, we had a stronger team comp at 22 minutes and then we're able to turn it on. So I am totally okay with the way Cloud9 plays, but anytime right now someone says like, you just need to pick more reliable stuff so you can make mistakes. It's like maybe, but that's not the goal that C9 is moving towards. Anyway, C9 is, I think, the most, will continue to be the most talked about team in the global sense. Yes. Right? Even though their current interest level within the LCS is kind of low just because they're so much better than everyone else. It's like the Warriors when they're winning 65 games or 73 games in a regular season. You say, it's exciting to see like how great they are, but the competition like actually doesn't seem to be there.
I mean, it's like I think that's a great point. I'm kind of curious when you mentioned or when we talk about good, like this is something like that's a word that I've always kind of like put like scare quotes around is like what does good even mean? And so to you, when you say a team is good, what are the markers you look for that will qualify? If it, like I can show you a 1-9-0 team in like let's say in Japan versus a 10-0 team in the LPL, and without even looking, you're probably gonna say the LPL team is better.
Yeah.
Right? But they're both crushing their competition equally. So I'm just kind of curious, when you're looking at the tape of the two teams, what are the signifiers to you as to what a good team is?
That's a great question, because the signifiers, we call it like the eye test, kind of change every year, and it depends on how you evaluate what you think the best way of playing the game is. So what ends up happening from like the public sphere is you take their success and then you apply their like region multiplier. So depending on who you are, it's like the LEC is a 1.0 and therefore your multiplier for NA, and this is where you're immediately inciting yourself for flame. Let's say it's a 0.75.
1.5 compared to EU, right?
Well, in a sense, yeah. Like it's like, oh yeah, an EU team with a few flaws, oh, they're still going to be better than an NA team that looks perfect, sort of thing. Or like your best region in the world would be LPL. That would be like your 1.0. Then you have LEC at like, these are totally made up numbers, by the way. 0.9.
No, these are official. Make sure we record these.
LCK is 0.85. LCS is like 0.75 or something. That's how like the fans do it. But what I try and do is, right now, the markers I look for is like, how exactly is this team winning? And when they make a play, do I get frustrated that the other team isn't matching it? Or is this play faster than I was able to follow? So what happened a lot early on in the season is like, oh, they preempted the next play that I was expecting of going to Rift Herald. Or, oh, I was looking at this thing, but they were already making a play in the mid lane. Or, oh, I don't think they should do this. Like if I can predict what's going to happen like 2 minutes beforehand, I'm like, well, maybe this team isn't like godlike good. But that's a really hard thing to describe right now, because my understanding of the meta and the game is constantly evolving. The team's understanding of the meta of the game is constantly evolving. But from the eye test of like, hey, this team could compete internationally, right now Cloud9 passes it. Because I look around the globe and we just saw G2 lose to Schalke, right? We see Fnatic. I don't think they've necessarily figured everything out. I think right now I'd be very interested to watch Cloud9 versus G2.
Yeah.
I think going in, because of the history, I'd still favor G2.
Yep.
But like if we did Rift Rivals right now, I'd be like, ooh, like maybe Cloud9's in better form.
That'd be a good game.
Right? It would be a good game at the moment. So
when you're talking about this preempting stuff, I'm just kidding. Do you have like an example? Because that's a really interesting thing for me to hear is, do you have like an example? It doesn't have to be from Cloud9 or any team, like even this year, of an example of like a play that happened that just made you just go like, oh crap, like wow, that was so good, like something that just kind of took you off guard. Yeah,
this is already old news, but it's the thing that jumped to mind, and it probably ended up making me slightly overvalue Dignitas early on in the season.
Yeah.
So I was tracking a lot of early Rift Herald swaps in the LCS early in the year, and I'm like, okay, the way a lot of these teams are trying to play is they're trying to get pressure bottom lane, they're trying to get a Drake before 6 or 7 minutes, and then on their support recall at 8 minutes, the support will run towards Rift, and if their AD carry still has TP, like he can kind of go wherever he wants. If he doesn't, he has to follow. But what ends up happening when you're like two evenly matched teams is you lose enough tempo doing the Drake that you're then late for the Rift swap. So what Dig did against TL is they never did Drake and they just swapped for Rift early. And you could tell it caught TL off guard.
Yeah.
And I got really excited when I saw it in game. Right? So that was one of those things of, hey, here's a pattern other teams are doing. This team preempted that pattern and got something good.
Nice.
That would be one example of it. And then you end up seeing a lot of this in G2 games as well, just in like either how well they sync recalls or like how quickly perks arrive somewhere where you just didn't expect him to be. Little stuff like that that's kind of harder to explain.
I think that analysis is much better than the Reddit analysis of looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, their KDA was good and they're in this region, so that's how good they are.
That 27 minutes must have been a good game.
Yeah.
Like just they crushed it.
Yeah, in terms of the overarching question though, it really is Cloud9 and then everyone else. Yeah. And I really want, like G2 has Fnatic to push them usually. I need TL to push C9. Otherwise, I don't think C9 will be able to do it at MSI. That's what I'm going to look at for the rest of the year.
I think you're hedging a little bit. I want Cloud9 to just crush everybody. I want them to have no losses going to MSI, and I want to just risk it.
That's the story. You want it all in, right?
I'm all in. I want them to just crush MSI after that too. No losses at all this year. That's Cloud9.
God, if they're undefeated going into MSI, we're way ahead of ourselves. You can tell how starved we are for a dominant team in the LCS. We're like, they need to be undefeated, and then they need to go into MSI. They need to be undefeated there too. It's just,
I would love to listen to that podcast like right before group stage starts at MSI, where you were trying to like ease expectations.
Everyone who's cast the LCS for like 7 years is going to hedge.
Yes,
that's just what it is. Yeah, because there's been enough people that go in hyped to be disappointed. But this, okay, we spent so long on C9, and we're going to continue talking about them. So we're gonna move on, Kien, to the power of evil. We're pushing on to the power of evil.
The power of evil.
The soup of the LCS, and it's all about. One of the overarching stories for me coming into these next 5 weeks of the LCS is who can differentiate themselves from the pack and how quickly that can happen.
Yep.
For FlyQuest, they were a team that many people, including me, had put just outside of the playoffs. Now they're 5-3. Power of Evil leads the league in DPM and damage percentage. Ignar's played 8 unique champions in 8 games. And they have Golden Guardians and COG up this week. So in terms of jumping out ahead of the pack, they could be 7-3.
7-3, I think.
Which would put them in the top team conversation, surely. What are you thinking about this? I liked your line. The TSM game in particular was a messy game. Some call it a fiesta. You call it avant-garde.
It's avant-garde. I mean, like we've talked about this before. Power of Evil's played a lot of these games, and for whatever reason he came down and it's like we're gonna sit here and we're gonna go 45 minutes, and I'm gonna turn on an end game, and that's how we're gonna win. And it just like I was looking at the stats too, and I remember we were talking about this last week as well about how we were like, oh, Niski might be like the most valuable player in the league right now, but he also
won Player of the Week, which I was happy about,
which is great. Yeah. But we were like, okay, there's also a world in which he doesn't get one of the top 3 mid laner spots, like once you get to the end of it. And I think that's unlikely, like extremely unlikely at this point. But look at a guy like Power of Evil who's posting up stats that are just like top across the board. And of course, stats, I think, don't always tell the full story. A lot of it's just like, how does your team play? Like your damage numbers are always going to be higher if you were going to later in the game, because that's when you start actually chunking. And of course, they've played quite a few long games already this split, but this is a team that I've been pretty high on from the get-go, and I continue to be high on them. I think they played the game in a way that I feel like is going to be advantageous in terms of growth going forward, because when you have a support that's going to make aggressive plays, you have Turtle, who is always aggressive, and I think it creates a lot of awkward situations on the map that you can then learn from and grow from as a team. Like, I think when you're put in situations where you're like, oh, we're kind of in a crappy situation, what do we do? Yeah. You start to learn from those as the split goes on, and they have players, I think, that are capable of capitalizing on those situations, and especially Power of Evil. And I think the big question for me right now with this team is whether Viper is somebody that can be a top-level top laner, and if he is, this is a team that is pretty easily the 3rd best team in the league for me. If Viper is somebody who can push up to there, but it's like and part of that's a product of like there's just nobody else in the league. It's Cloud9 1. I think Liquid is gonna be 2 by the end of the split, and so I think you're fighting for the what's the best piece of the soup left. Yeah. If Cloud9 is like the entire bowl, then FlyQuest is like trying to be the nice piece of broccoli or something that floats to the top, right? So there's that little tree slowly floating. I think that is their ceiling. I think that like I don't see a world in which they beat Cloud9, but like I said, I said 99%. I don't see anybody beating Cloud9. So I think FlyQuest is a team that's going to be very good. They have a very good shot of being 3rd.
I like that you brought up Viper, because as you're going through this roster, like Santorin has been a LCS champion jungler in the past. Power of Evil has made Deep Worlds runs. He was on that team with Ignar. Wild Turtle has been a champion in the past. The whole team has actually had proven history except for Viper, and even looking at a lot of their results early on in the split, there was Viper's Ribbon game.
Yes.
And that was the only time he looked like he was a peak performer, whereas everyone else on the team has had their own individual games where they looked like peak performers. So that is the one dangling thing that holds me back from putting FlyQuest is like a legit team, because that thing can get exploited in the playoffs for sure. But for now, I think they're going to be 7-3, which means it's actually okay to start getting excited about FlyQuest, which we haven't said in like ever, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, good for them. Get the trees going. They start looking pretty good. I mean, it's just if Viper can look like if he looks good in anything but Riven, then I think you start really buying into this team. But until that happens, I think they're kind of capped a little bit.
Yeah. Speaking of buying in, the constant conversation around Immortals, 5-3, the other 5-3 team in the league. Xmithy had the flex game where he totally ruined Brox's debut.
It was such a good game from him. I was sitting there, I was like, wow. Like, I mean, they had the initial kill on him, which I think was like Hakuho just had a great ward.
It was an amazing ward. And then, like, just watching that replay, it was so clean. There's no way Broxa thought he was going to get chain CC'd from there. Like, the angle that... So, for those of you who... I'm going to try and paint a picture. Like, Xmithy was doing Gromp on Sejuani, and Leesman was trying to invade through the new Season 10 brush that is now in that entrance to the jungle near Drake. And there was a ward there, but what Xmithy did is he pulled the Gromp down so that Broxa wouldn't be able to see it quickly. And then as he jumped over the wall, Hakuho's Nautilus also found the angle so his hook wouldn't hit the wall. Like, that's such a close corridor that was the perfect collapse onto him. And then to Prawley's point, which I do agree with, like, if you fall behind a Sej as a Lee early, it's actually pretty close to GG. So that's really all they needed to get that game going, but it ended up making it go from, like, bad to worse for Broxa that he died in that moment.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I was just sitting there, I was like, wow, that was just... Because like you said, I'm a jungle. Like, when I play jungle, Leesman is my one. Like, because I'm a mid AD main to begin with.
Okay.
And so I'm one of those players who, if I play jungle, like, I think there's like tons of us who are like AD mid mains, and if we get forced to jungle, we pick
Leesman because it's
like,
the mechanics gen.
Yeah,
it's the flex guy.
Yeah, it's just like I don't like. It's like if I lose, whatever, I have fun because it's Leesman. And I remember people memed High for being like what was it? They called him like Uncle. Like insect or whatever, because he was so slow on the insect, but it was like effective. I'm like even worse than that. Like, I don't even try to insect. I will always just flash behind. Like,
right.
I don't even do the R flash. I flash and then I kick.
Right.
Like, or I just sit back and I just kick the guy away. Like, I just play very like defensive Leesman. But it's like so I know what it's like to fall behind on Leesman because you just feel completely useless. So it kind of felt bad for me watching Rex. There was that stat too halfway through the game. I think he had 57 damage.
Yeah, it was like the one auto attack he got off while he died.
And it was like you hate to see that. Let's give them another game. And of course, they looked so much better in the second game. But but of course, we're talking about IMT real quick. I think that was a fantastic game from them. They went up to 5-2 right after that game. And so my point was, after that, I was like, wow, this is like they might actually just be good. I was like sitting there like starting to take notes. I was gonna sit there and ask you like, at what point do we start buying into IMT? And then, of course, the next day happened. Yeah. And the point is obviously not right now. We still do not buy into IMT. You look at Eika's numbers in particular across the board. And then I pulled up a few stats. He sits at 51.4% KP, which is 11% below the next lowest person. Woo. And then he's 24% below the highest person. Like, kill participation, like, that's kind of like, that's not necessarily like he's playing like, that doesn't mean he's for surely playing bad, but it does mean that the team isn't playing around him or he's not playing with his team in a way that lets him be involved in kills across the map. And that feels really bad to me, 8 games through the season to be that low. And one of the things I do want to talk about is, like, I think a lot of people have kind of nailed on Eika, Ryoma, and Jiizuke a lot. And I'm kind of curious to you is, I think, to me, like, I don't think they're necessarily playing well, but I don't think they'd be getting this much crap if the Monte and Pole Belter were sitting on the bench. So I'm kind of curious, how much do you think that this flame is, like, part of the narrative to me is like, oh, they're getting flamed because people want Pole Belter and which is weird to me because people also never want Pole Belter
exactly
playing.
So I bolded this part of your thoughts as well, where you mentioned there's that constant call of people calling for Eika, Ryoma, and Jiizuke's jobs. Like, do they deserve an import slot? Yep. I am definitely in the middle on this, but the way I kind of see it is there is actually a pretty high level of nationalism involved in this. Oh, yeah. Like, there's a certain level of the people who want Eika, Ryoma, or Jiizuke to fail just because they want to see NA talent succeed. And I think that's also the other side of the coin. So, like, the people that are flaming Eika, Ryoma, and Jiizuke are different than the people that flame Pobelter and Damonte, but they're kind of doing it for the same reasons. Like the Pobelter Damonte guys are like the national pride people or like NA regional pride. And then the people that flame them are often like LEC or International League fans who are just like, haha, like it's the peanut gallery that likes talking down on LCS. It's like, oh yeah, you only have one NA mid, haha. So any opportunity, these guys on the brink are under this intense level of criticism. The way I would like to look at it is just try to remove the biases of the nationalism and say, how are they doing on the Rift?
Yeah.
And so far, Eika has not been good. Ryoma has not been good. But I also don't know if, like, I'm not even going to use the Pobelter Damonte standard because I don't necessarily want to get into the whole, this guy's been a pro for 4 years in LCS and we wanted to try something new, which is kind of why I see this. But, like, I can't say that Eika or Ryoma shouldn't get this opportunity because Blaze Olive or like Insanity or some other Academy mid laner deserves the chance too. It's like, if we look at the way LEC has succeeded by stopping imports, I think that's what's driving a lot of this conversation. There was this really interesting stat. There was a certain window of time where like EU LCS actually imported more Koreans than the LCS. Mm-hmm. But when they found their success, it's when they stopped importing Korean players. But I don't see that as a reason not to import European players who speak high quality English. Because I don't see, like, there's like a tiny little bit of homesickness that could come in, but that's also going to happen if you're moving to Berlin anyway. So like, I see no issue with trying out European talent, and I don't value like these import slots as highly as other people. So I'm definitely in the middle of the two arguments, but the current climate is a bunch of flame out of Eika and Ryoma and Jiizuke, and I want to give a little bit less, if that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think the import question, I just want to say real quick with the import thing is that I think if you look literally at the last two world champions, they both had key import players.
The Soul Lanes, like only Korean top and mid laners have won world titles.
Who were critical to their wins. So I'm sitting here like, you want to flame imports? I feel like you're mistargeting the ire there, right?
Yeah.
With regard to these three in specific, though, I'm kind of like, I would say I don't even think they're the three worst mid laners in the league, but I don't think the flame they're getting is proportional to their play. Like, not that I think they're playing well, but I would say there are potentially a couple players who are at least on the same level of quote unquote bad play or even worse than them, and I don't see those players getting as much flame. And so I think a lot of that definitely buys into like they have no name recognition. Like Crown has a lot of name recognition that protects him a bit from some of the flame he might otherwise receive.
For another couple weeks.
Yeah, for it's getting there.
Yeah.
Golden Glue is somebody who, like, I don't know how much better he's performing than these guys, but like he's somebody that's also in the past received a ton of flame, and I think he's escaped it for the most part.
Yeah.
The split, I couldn't honestly tell you whether that's deserved or not. Versus
you got like a redirect on Keith. It's interesting. Like, I realize I talked for a while there because I still haven't necessarily thought deeply about this topic because it is really interesting. Like, what should be your ideal approach to NA versus international talent development for your import slots? Because there's no way there is a consensus on this.
No, of course
not. You know what I mean? And that's why it's such an interesting conversation. I need to think about it more. You got me thinking.
I mean, that's like I wrote something. I never ended up publishing this, but I wrote something where I mused on this a lot, just thinking about the import slot and like what it actually means. And it's just really interesting to think about. Like, one, of course, people bring up the size of the NA player base quite a bit. I mean, compared to like EU, and I think that's of course a huge thing. But the idea of the import slot is always meant to protect local talent, right? Like, you cap it at 2 so that other players have a chance to grow. Because I think the fear was always, they would just import a team of 5 Korean players because they have better infrastructure. They're going to be better. It doesn't mean like NA talent natively is always worse. It's just that there's a pool over there that has much better infrastructure to let them develop. So why would you not just pluck from that? And that's always been an interesting thing for me to think about, is like, where at what point do we cap, and who do we choose to cap, and why do we choose to cap it? And I think there's a lot of stuff you can really dive into there. It's really interesting. Yeah,
like the CFL, Canadian Football League, you need a certain percentage of your roster to be Canadian. Interestingly enough, right? So like a lot of times you can be a, quote, like professional football player. Otherwise, the CFL would be 100% guys who didn't get drafted by the NFL.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the Canadian Football League, so they want something in there. There's always, but like that's not what happens. Like the Grey Cup champion doesn't then go into a tournament against the 49ers or the Chiefs. So
yeah, I mean, there's always protections. Like there's like even with our import rules, there are things we could adjust to make it look different. Like for example, you could say, okay, for 2021, NA teams are no longer allowed to have a mid lane import player. Like I mean, those are like we just arbitrarily decided. Or it's not entirely arbitrary. There are good reasons for it, but our rule is that you can have 2 import slots, and then after X amount of years, they don't count anymore.
After like 4 years, or if they get citizenship, which is I think the citizenship thing is pretty cool.
And we could have made it like you could have limited roles. There's so many different things you could have eliminated specific countries, specific regions they could have come from. Like there's a lot of different. Like you could have even said like, oh, you can import anybody, but they must be at least 21. So like maybe they have to go through like a few years in Europe or whatever first. So there are a lot of things that could be altered, and just like when we set these lines, it's always an interesting conversation for me in terms of like
this seems like, as we've kind of dilly-dallied on this topic for a bit, a really good idea for either a like post MSI or post Worlds podcast, because every year that those tournaments happen, that's just all anyone wants to talk about. It's like how, what's the problem with this region, or how do imports work, and like that's when everyone will be thinking about it. So I think that'll be a ripe time for conversation. Anyway.
Yeah, we would love imports if we just looked at China.
Yeah, just too bad the LPL is very capable of keeping all of their players.
Yes.
Because it's the most popular league in the world. Immortals, 5-3. The last thing I want to say on them is I actually want to stop having the conversation of like, are they or are they not deserving of top 2, and when are we going to start calling them a top team? And rather just have the conversation of, hey, most people thought they would suck.
Yep.
And they don't. So let's give them credit for that. Yeah. Rather than now trying to, like, I'm never going to hold the conversation of is Immortals a top 2 team. They're technically tied for second in the standings, but they're not a top 2 team yet, to me, based on where they came from. But that doesn't mean I can't credit them and say how I'm impressed that they are 5-3 with the way that they came into the season, only having a couple of days practice before week 1, and the way they've kind of manufactured these victories through experience and smart play. I think while Xmithy would have MVP campaign legs if they do finish the season in second, Hakuho and Altec are like sleeper winners here, where when I and everyone else was ranking this team more lowly, I don't think those players were considered like top half, which is how they've been performing. So shout outs to them. That's all I want to say.
Agreed. Double shout out. If Immortals hits number 2, I am pledging my MVP vote to Xmithy right now.
Right? Well,
just
okay.
Giving it to him.
I am never giving the MVP to a player who's not on C9 if C9 goes 18-0.
Okay, if they go 18-0, that's my one exception. Yeah. But if like they're 18-0, it's almost like I don't know who to pick, so I'm just going to give it to Xmithy.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if Immortals is 15-3, then I'll give it to Xmithy, but that's just not going to happen. I don't want to go team by team since we've done a lot of dilly-dallying around here, but I did want to make a point about Dignitas, where I bolded the start of your thought on them, where you said like Grig carries one game, gets no credit, then feeds the next, and people call for his head. I have thought this way about Grig for a while, and it's one of the reasons that I put Dig in 5th before the season when a lot of people had them in 7th because they had EG and 100 Thieves as the other playoff teams. I want to see way more Olaf-style Grig games, and I don't know if he's still that type of player, but I can see shades of it, because originally when TSM was deciding to go with Grig, this is back about a year and a half or so, it's because he was like the best solo queue jungler in the region. And you become the best solo queue jungler by being greedy, by getting farm, and by carrying. And Grig is actually capable of this. It's so rare that people play through Grig. And even in that Olaf game, I was really honing in on him, because it's like, all right, they have Soraka Olaf. This is actually the Olaf carry comp. And he was still like doing supportive things that he shouldn't have done. Like Grig needs to be way more willing to be assertive and tell the team to get on his back, because I think he's actually capable of it.
Yeah.
But like that year of criticism and like changing his style to be as supportive, like this is what a pro jungler should do, hurts. When TSM finished 3rd in 2018 summer, it was by playing through Grig, actually. If you go back and watch those games from way back then, I don't know, that was like my random, hey, Grig is not this player, but I want him to be this player. And I think the meta's in a point where you can run games through junglers. And it was cool that we saw a glimpse of it, because he's not good at supportive jungling. Man, he's not good at being bossed around.
I want to see it. Like, I feel like we need to like let's talk to player management and create like a support group for junglers, like post career jungle. Like, I'd be kind of curious to look at like their solo kill win rate and play style before and after being a pro. Like, if they keep playing League of Legends, do they just completely fall off a map after? Because like Santorin, I think, has been a very good counter example. Like, he's always been high ranks, playing. But it's, I think it's an interesting thing is, and it made me wonder. Because we've seen the Olaf carry a couple times this year now, not just in NA. Like, what is the actual, like, why don't, like, it makes me wonder when I see it happen. Like, it just pops off, it crushes. If you get those, why don't you just do it every game? Like, what actually stops teams from doing it?
It's a great question. So sometimes Olaf is banned.
Yeah.
There are a lot of intricacies with your lane matchups that prevent a jungler from being able to hard farm. Like, there is so much that happens in pro games right now that is like. Also, the way a lot of teams have constructed their rosters, like if you're paying a solo laner $1 million a year, you're not going to have your jungler be like, actually, that guy's freezing on you. Don't worry about it. Just get starved.
Yeah.
Right? No, the jungler's going to go up there and help him shove.
Yeah.
Like, it's just what has to be done based on the structure of a lot of teams. But I would still like to see it more. And for the most part, this year, it hasn't been possible because jungle XP was too low.
Yeah.
So they've had like a week to get this strat online. And as much as people love to look at drafts in a vacuum, you're drafting for your players, you're drafting for your practice, and you're drafting for your opponent. And so many LCS teams have star players in solo lanes and do not have the carry jungle player to run a jungle game through. So that's why I think we don't see it as much. My theory, which is going to be different than maybe a coach's theory or a player's theory, is that like running a game through Olaf right now is a really good way of winning. But if you haven't been practicing that, then it's just not going to work.
Makes sense. Yeah. As a jungler, I'm curious, are there any other Olaf-like champions that a jungler could play right now feasibly and hard carry?
Karthus and Olaf are by far the 2 fastest farm junglers. And I think those are the only ones that can work in pro. Like, in solo queue, you can run a game as Shyvana. I'm really excited to see what happens on patch 10.4 with like the Cinderhulk buffs, because if you can fast farm as a tank jungler, then things will get really interesting, but like I haven't tested those to know if it's there. Karthus and Olaf are the 2 power farmers that I think you can run a game as.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I know I said I was going to go after Dignitas. I don't like Froggen on Ori.
Wow. You don't like Froggen on Ori? I feel like.
Not anymore.
Why is that?
I don't know. So he's played it 4 times.
Yes.
They've done 4 Ori games. They've won 2 of them. They lost 2 of them. He usually outfarms his opponent. He gets strong, but I don't see Orianna as being a reliable enough 30-minute carry to validate the way they're playing the early game with it. If you just replace that Ori with a Victor, I think they win more games. That was kind of the thought. Because he will like flash and one-shot Sven as his farmed Ori, like his 50 CS advantage Ori over Niski.
Yeah.
And that'll be it. Whereas Victor has way more sustained DPS in those late game team fights.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. This is just like I was looking through stats before this and I said I don't like his Ori.
I like that. Tag that. We're gonna tag Dignitas. Let them know.
Yeah.
Pick Victor.
Let's talk about TSM. Last week, this is what you wrote. You heaped a lot of praise on a TSM and suggested they had an outside chance of becoming the best team in the league. In fact, last week's article was simply a prank, is what you also wrote. How have you flip-flopped on TSM week to week?
Well, as easy as them being 4-2, and now they went 0-2. So that's my Reddit top line analysis. They lost 2 games, so they're not good anymore. it was. I think, and I ended up ending on a fairly high note with TSM. Is I don't think it's a bad situation. And I think you got people have talked about this a lot. I think you talked about it as well in terms of the idea of a late scaling kind of I thought that whole conversation was ridiculous. Like if you have a 5K gold lead at 15 minutes and then you have a Baron with a 6K gold lead at about 30 minutes,
Yeah.
you should be able to win the game. It was like the comp wasn't like obviously you get outscaled, but you should you had a win condition, which was to crush Murley and just roll it through.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like TSM was in a position where they should have won the game, and they didn't play the side lanes properly. With they had Talia in that game, and they just didn't end up using her in the mid game on the sides at all. And it just felt like a missed opportunity. And I think they're gonna look at that footage and really be pissed at themselves that they let that one get away. But I'm also looking at them, it's like, if we're gonna lose the game, that sucks to lose, like on a morale level. But they played the game well enough where they could have won, and I think I'd walk away with that pretty happy with like we did what we needed to win, then we didn't execute. Like we didn't when we got to the watering hole, we didn't drink the water, and I think it's a simple just drink the water next time. You know?
I agree. I also have one more thing that's like a meta point. I have come to the conclusion that you should play Ornn every game. Because you can put him in top lane, you can put him in mid lane, he can wash laning phases, and like he is not weak enough that teams will run over you.
Yeah.
And his late game power is just so incredibly high. That's where I'm at with Ornn at the moment.
He's good. He plays support too. I think they just played him last night in a support role somewhere, and it was like
there's like a Senna Ornn lane that you can do now.
God,
it got
awful.
played a little bit in Academy. I don't know if that's like the right thing to do, but I think a lot of people are kind of on this train. Like if I'm looking at even 10-2, like I'm just on Games of Legends right now from like the top 4, which is really just top 3 right now. It's like Ornn is banned more than picked. Oftentimes he's banned in phase 2. So like I think that should increase. I think you should just pick him in phase 1.
Yeah.
Like if he's not banned in phase 1, I think you should just pick him and you can flex him.
I mean, he's like basically one of those, like I remember those old metas where like Maokai would just get picked every single game, and it just kind of feels like that, where it's a super reliable tank. It doesn't matter what happens. Like I've always, like my philosophy is I've always thought top lane was useless in solo queue especially, is I just, if I'm jungling, I ignore top lane. If I'm playing mid lane, I ignore top lane. No matter what happens, if I'm playing top, I ignore myself. I don't ever interact with top lane because I don't feel like it brings, like I'm just like, you can let top lane can just go 0-3, and as long as they're playing a tank, they're still going to be useful in team fights, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like Ornn is one of those champions that's like, unless they have a hyper-scaling Fiora, but then it's like, even if they have Fiora, just like, screw it. Just let Fiora do whatever you want. You go mid lane, you can engage from 10 miles away with Ornn. Like, the other team can't be up. Like, I think that's one of the great things about Ornn is, like, one misstep, and suddenly you're burning flashes, you're engaged on. It's so hard to get a good split against Ornn because he's so good at engaging on the rest of your team.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I just kind of have these notes that I want to get through where I think Dardoch has actually been really, really good. And I have like an extra little bit to watch for next TSM game.
Yeah.
So first off, he's very flexible. They let him absorb tons of jungle bans, and he still has successful games. He's played jungle Pantheon, jungle Set, and jungle Kiana. So like he's already playing jungle champions that other people just aren't. And TSM is getting draft advantages because of it. But pay attention to the first like 2 minutes and 30 seconds of the game, and watch the minimap because in all of the games I've watched the minimap, Dardoch pings where the other jungler is at the start of the game.
That's impressive.
Like, mega reliably.
Yeah.
So he will be way off on, like, the bottom left quadrant, Dardoch, and you will just see pings on, like, Gromp Wolves.
Yeah.
And that's where the jungler is. I'm like, what the... Like, he's really good early game. He's made some, like, bad teamfight plays of, like, overreaching or, like, ulting on Pantheon at the wrong time because he's pushing, but there's like a level of early game, like brain that is really on point with Dardoch right now, and I wanted to just call it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you could if you could pause the game sometime, like if teams were allowed timeouts at like the 25-minute mark, I think TSM would be so much better because then you could just pause the game and somebody could just look at Dardoch and like, Dardoch, you need to think for 2 seconds before you engage here, like because sometimes you see him, you see him on the side, like in the Pantheon game in particular, and I saw a few engages he was looking at, and if you just freeze frame right there, and like Dardoch, just think for 2 seconds about what you're gonna accomplish by jumping onto this back line here instead of peeling for your freaking carry. Well, and then like, that's the thing, they just got to get a little better. Like he's just a little too, I think, gung ho with his engages. But, he's been great. I will watch the mini map and we'll see him ping it out.
All right, I got a lot of my stuff in. We haven't touched on your 100 Thieves, EG, Liquid, or CLG stuff. What one are you most excited about? Like as you're writing 10 thoughts, what's the most pronounced thought?
Okay, the easiest one
go down on
is we're definitely not talking about CLG.
Yeah, we can give them a break for this week.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Liquid. I actually want to talk a little bit about Liquid.
Let's do it.
So we spent a lot of time talking about how they struggle because Broxton hasn't been here, and I think in that shuffle, which I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was one of the big people saying like whatever happens, TL's a wash. It doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started looking at some numbers. Like I was talking to a friend like when they lost to Immortals, who was like, wow, Doublelift does not look good this game. And then I looked at his stats throughout the split, and he has not looked good at all this split.
Mm-hmm.
He is dead last for 80 carries in terms of damage per minute, which is that's a really weird stat for him. It's like because I think damage again. It's not like Liquid is a team that, like, we've talked about, they're really good at team fighting even in those losses. So you would expect his AD or his damage to be a little bit higher. And and being dead last, I feel like, I don't know if that's ever happened for Doublelift before. And just feels like he's had a really, if you changed his name to, let's say that was Keith, he would be getting flamed to hell right now.
Yeah.
But he's getting away with it because he's Doublelift. And I think it's fine that he's getting away with it because I expect him to be better. And then he finally crushed lane against of course it was against CLG, but they dominated that game. And he was up 40 CS in lane. They took the turret immediately, just an actual bot difference game. They rotated, and that's when TL has been good. It doesn't matter who their jungler is, as long as they win bot lane and are able to rotate them around to take turrets, they're always going to be good. And I really appreciated seeing that. Again, because nobody else is playing Varus. I don't even know if it's good. But they picked it because it was lane dominant, and they were able to use it properly. And I think that's something I hope to see more from them is, screw the meta. Screw Senna. You don't need to play Senna. Play whatever is good for your style, which is, shit on lane, rotate and take turrets. That's how TL wins games.
Did you catch, Sad Boy Jensen? We had a sound on tape. It's the just backroom interviews we have that we broadcast out.
No, I didn't catch that one.
Yeah, so this was actually before their Immortals game when they were I guess they were 2-4. And he was kind of yeah, I know a lot of people think that we're taking a break or that we're not trying to go hard, but for me, I don't know what to do. It's not like I can work harder. It's not like I can practice harder. It was basically yeah, I'm doing everything I can. I don't know why we're not winning.
Yeah.
Which was kind of shocking for me to hear because from the outside, my perception of TL was kind of okay, they won 4 titles in a row. This is back in the early 2000s after the Lakers had won 2 titles in a row, and then Shaq would just show up out of shape and they'd go 20-20 in the first 40 games and they'd make it in as the 4th seed in the West, and then they'd win the title anyway, right? Because they just felt like they could turn it on. Except, here's my maybe controversial theory. Doublelift is Shaq, Jensen is Kobe in this sense. Jensen's trying really hard. He's why aren't we winning? I want to win all these games.
Yeah.
And Doublelift's yeah, I know I'm better than all these guys eventually. I'll play myself into shape.
I don't think that's controversial. I think that comparison makes sense. When you just think about the personalities, I would describe Kobe as a little more toxic than Shaq. And when you think about Jensen's past, very famously extremely toxic, he's much better nowadays.
Yeah. The analogy only holds in terms of level of early season effort and what that does. So that's kind of what I still think is going to happen. And I'm mixed on this because I definitely feel player and team burnout for the teams that go to every international 2 years in a row is high.
Yeah.
The midseason invitational is a 3-week, month-long commitment where other teams are able to take it easy. The World Championship is a 3-week boot camp into a long tournament. So these guys have had really long years, 2 years in a row. And Doublelift, I think it is Doublelift in the camp of not necessarily playing that well because potentially lack of practice.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of the TL maybe doesn't seem that way. I think Jensen in particular has been their best player.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's where I'm at. The fact that they have had this really bad start and are 2 games out of second with those 2 teams being FlyQuest and Immortals, when they look at the big picture, they're actually, we're fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to step back and contextualize it a little bit for himself. I think it's rough. Like, I think it's that one more game syndrome thing where it's like at the end of it, you always want to end on a win. And I think the problem with Liquid's year in 2019 is they ended on losses. It was like the most crushing way. Like they got knocked out embarrassingly again out of Worlds.
Yeah, in the finals in MSI as well, but 3-0.
Yeah, and I feel like that sticks with you over the offseason. So I think they came back and they wanted to win. I was told, like, from my knowledge, that Liquid was actually smashing scrims even before Broxah got here. And I feel like that probably contributes a little bit to the confusion as well. Why aren't we winning? And, of course, they just got used to winning so much that it ended up, like, when they start losing, it's like, oh, wow, like, what is actually going on here?
Yeah.
I don't know how much, like, I don't know how much Double F is or isn't practicing. That's not something I've really looked much into. He's definitely looked off.
What we've seen in game is that he's been off.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only thing that I know for sure.
Yeah.
For all those people that are like hate rampant speculation, that's kind of what I'm going off of. It's just he hasn't looked good.
He hasn't looked good. I think that's been a fact. I think he probably knows it. They look great in the win over against CLG. I think everybody looks great against CLG. It's like they're like reverse C9.
The most CLG thing will be beating C9.
They're gonna beat C9. I said it. I mean it. Like I also said 99% chance C9 would go.
The 1%.
Okay, that's 1% that's happening this week though.
Yeah.
I'd be honestly I'd be shocked if they beat him, but I also wouldn't be shocked to be one of those things that's like, wow, like we saw this coming and didn't see it coming at the same time, you know.
A couple of things I want to hit on before we wrap this up is people liked the NBA talk last week, so I want to talk about the All-Star game.
I actually did not catch it. I was busy.
I'll tell you about it. And also, Faker signing. For some people, I think they're like, oh yeah, Faker just re-signed with SKT. But a player of that caliber getting like a bit of an ownership stake in T1, it's making like wide news. Yeah. So Mina Kimes mentioned the Faker signing at the end of ESPN Daily today, which is one of those podcasts. Yeah. So she's also the one who wrote the Unkillable Demon King article back in
the most famous
2015.
Article.
Yeah, so it's cool that he has like Faker is that type of player that has reach that goes beyond League of Legends.
Yes.
So it is always enjoyable when a player like that is promised to stick around for longer.
Yeah, and T1 looks good right now too. Like everything's clicking for them. I think it was really cool to see that. I agree.
Yeah. And then the All-Star game. They changed the rules for the All-Star game. Were you familiar with this?
Yes, I saw the highlights. I didn't watch it live, but
the way it basically worked is the fourth quarter was first team to 24 points untimed.
Yep.
Except the first three quarters carried over. So Team Giannis, which is basically the Eastern Conference team, is how it worked. He just drafted all the Eastern Conference players.
It was funny watching that, yeah.
Yeah, they had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter. And a lot of people thought it would be like this 5-minute quarter because it's an All-Star game. But what ended up happening is everyone just started trying really hard.
Yeah.
And it was the funniest thing to watch because all of these players like have superstar syndrome. So when a call doesn't go their way, they're the one that goes up to the ref.
That's funny.
I felt so bad for this ref because like one call would happen and it'll be like LeBron James, James Harden, like everyone would just be yelling, Chris Paul, like they'd all be yelling at the same ref. And I could just kind of see his face. Like I was not expecting this level of like competitiveness in an All-Star game. They reviewed like a bunch of different calls, but it was actually one of the most entertaining like 30 minutes of basketball I've seen in a while because I don't think I've seen in my lifetime an All-Star game reach that level of competitiveness.
Yeah, no, it was super well received. It's like, I mean, a few of the early 2000 games were a little more intense back when, like, because Kobe would care, Jordan would be there. But like, I think
there'd be like intense moments.
Yeah, I was talking to Jeff about this, and we were talking about how I think once LeBron shifted in and took over, like, because LeBron is friends with everybody in the league, or he's friends with a lot of people, so it's like it's a lot more buddy. They don't want to like. They chill a bit more. Like, he didn't do dunk contests or anything. And I think that's kind of shifted. And it's interesting to see players shift back a little bit. Like Giannis, I think, maybe leading that next wave. And I hope we get a lot more competitive stuff like that. 'Cause it's fun to watch,
Yeah.
Because, like, that's the dream for all of us is watching these guys, like, go at it. Like, it's fun to watch, regular Lakers go against Bucks or whatever. But it's like this is fantasy fulfillment is watching just all the best
in
players.
Like this exhibition game.
And it's like those like we've talked about this with League of Legends and All-Star games as well. Like it's never to the same level we want, but it's always like the idea of a dream team coming together and you see. And I think the Asian Rift rivals in particular
ended up being a little bit like that.
Does highlight that a little bit. And I think sometimes it just makes me think about like how cool, like, because we always do these weird like hypotheticals where it's like, wow, like who's better, 2014 Samsung White or 2015 SKT? And I think like that's what the All-Star game kind of does, is it lets you kind of live out that fulfillment. Is like, what would that look like? Like if I would pay so much money to see 2014 Samsung versus 2015 SKT.
But what patch do they play on?
So
do you give them like a month to boot camp on the current patch?
I mean, I think you do on each patch. So I think you do it on their patch first.
Oh man!
Like so, it's like the home and away. So one game on their patch, one game on the other patch, and then you have the tiebreaker be the one on the current patch.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my pitch for the next the new event.
That would be so hard to do technologically, but
that'd be extremely hard to do. Somebody like one of the tech people listening to this will be like, "Ooh, like
yeah,
screw
that's
you guys."
impossible." Yes.
That's why it's a dream, you know.
Yeah. Oh man. I wish there was a way. Sorry, I was just thinking about the way that the Lakers and like LeBron and AD are trying in the regular season this year, even though they don't necessarily have to, is really refreshing. And this loops back to Liquid a little bit. And I know they're going to say externally that like everyone is tryharding and stuff like that, but there is definitely a level of like apathy towards the spring split sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy that they're trying hard this.
Yeah, but like I want the teams to try because I do think that practice like you play, and it will have a certain level of carryover to the playoffs and the finals, and like just evaluating like why are you a professional player? Like I don't necessarily think it is 100% like just to win the title. And I think the NBA is in the process of kind of going through their own transformation here, because in early like 2010s, there was just like this title fever. Like literally nothing mattered except the title. And then when Durant joined the Warriors and it turned out that no one was allowed to win the title except for them, I kind of feel like a lot of these players had to decide for themselves that yes, titles are very important, but it's about the game and it's about competitiveness and it's about just winning the game. And I think that's what C9 is doing very well this year in the LCS. Like they are all about winning the LCS spring split because that is what is before them right now. And I hope that transfers through. It also doesn't hurt that, I don't know if we've mentioned this that much, they're the only LCS team without an LCS champion on the starting roster.
Wait,
that's
really?
like a nuts fact.
Like the other 9 teams have holy crap, that's crazy.
Yeah. You're going through it right now in your head.
Wait, who's on the Golden Guardians?
Hunter.
Hunter. Okay, what about Dignitas? Oh, Afromove.
It's nuts.
What the hell?
I know. FlyQuest, Santorin.
Yeah, that's crazy. Right? That's a really fun fact, actually.
Yeah. COG Stixay.
Yeah.
Right?
Huh.
C9, no one. EG Svenskeren.
So C9
Immortals, Smithy.
Randomly has a chip on their shoulder.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
That is a nice fact. I like that fact.
With that, I'm looking forward to week 5.
Let's go.
Thanks, Kien. Oh, also, sorry, I was going to wrap up the podcast. Everyone just clicked out. Please make sure you follow us on Spotify and iTunes. A lot of people still don't know that we're on those platforms because they just watch on YouTube. So if you do want the audio-only version, it's available in a lot of places. Just search JLXP on iTunes or Spotify or SoundCloud. It's there.
And hit that like, subscribe.
Oh, yeah, there's
on the stuff
there's
too.
the like, subscribe thing.
Great podcast. Big fan.
All right, thanks, Kien.